Okay, welcome to Seeing the Whole Child, using a holistic lens to see our students with a broader context. This is one of our virtual sessions as a part of the UWC-SEA Forum Learning to Shape the Future. I hope that you've been enjoying the sessions that have already taken place this morning. And of course, you know, we have so much to look forward to over the rest of the afternoon and again tomorrow. I want to remind people that all of the sessions are being recorded and will be made available on the Socio app shortly after the presentation. So we're anticipating that the recording should be uploaded within an hour or two following the live session. So if there are sessions concurrently happening that you're missing, you'll be able to catch those later on. I also want to remind people to continually refresh the app because there is a bit of a lag. We've had to make a few little updates to links, or announcements are constantly coming in. So again, do think to refresh that from time to time so you know you've got the latest information available to you. And of course, if you're having any problems, please feel free to email forum@uwcsea.edu.sg, or you can pop a question into the Q&A feature in the main menu of the Socio app. So this session is being hosted on Zoom, and audience members are welcome to keep their cameras on. We'll ask you to keep your microphones on mute over the course of the presentation. There may be some points later on where we'll invite you to engage, but please wait for those cues. And otherwise, we will be inviting you to join a virtual networking session immediately following, and details will be provided later on. I would now like to turn the session over to Stephanie to kick things off.
Thanks so much, Renee. So welcome to our session called Seeing the Whole Child, using a holistic lens to see our students within a broader context. Good afternoon. This session will be presented by three of us, and we're all three working within student support services here at UWC-SEA East, and we're all also working on our doctorates. So as we go around to introduce ourselves, we'll tell you a little bit about our research and also about what brings us to this topic today. So as you can see, and as Renee mentioned, my name is Stephanie Hepner. I'm the head of student support services here at the East Campus. My doctoral research is around self-regulated learning and self-assessment. And what brings me to this topic today is the fact, my own experience as a third culture kid. I attended an international school in Berlin, and I've also experienced the challenge of being a language learner in an educational context. And so my career then, I've worked to support students with a variety of learning needs in both US public schools and also international schools.
Thank you, Stephanie. My name's Natasha Hoff. I'm the EAL coordinator here. My research interests involve English medium of instruction and looking at language and culture. And I began this journey as a public school teacher in London, working with classes of English language learners and fully inclusive. And so part of my reason and my why is that I'd like all our students to be able to access the classroom and to be able to thrive. And also I have two third culture children as well.
I'm Kate. I'm Head of Infant Learning Support at UWC East, and my PhD is an exploration of the lived experience of expat families who have a neurodiverse child and the contextual factors that influence these experiences. And my connection to this is I have a career of teaching diverse learners in local and international schools, and I'm also the parent of two neurodiverse third culture kids. Okay, so in our session today, we'll be looking at what information we collect and use when we're supporting our students. And we're not thinking just about formal support through learning support or English as an additional language or other support services, but rather about broader support, the support we offer our students through our whole program, including academics, activities, service, outdoor ed, and knowing our students as individuals. Having a holistic lens is also essential for relationship building. And we'll be thinking about this from a K-12 perspective and the valuable insights offered by our diverse community. You'll have a chance to engage with the model we find helpful for thinking holistically about students. And we hope that by the end of this session, you'll have some practical approaches and tools so that when you're working with a student, You're thinking beyond the current assignment or subject or class and using a student-centered holistic lens to better understand the student's context. So why are we talking about this? Why do we think it's important? We'd like you to take a moment to think about your experiences. We want you to think about a time when you wished a teacher, parent, supervisor, colleague recognized that there was something more to a situation and that other information may have changed their approach and response. We've all had these kinds of experiences, and we imagine it didn't make you feel good, that you felt frustrated, angry, disappointed. We want to make sure that our students don't have these experiences.
Now, before we get started, we wanted to take a moment to thank everyone for choosing this session. We know that we've got a very diverse audience today. We've got parents, alumni, admin staff, students, and teachers in the audience today. We also have participants who are members of the Singaporean community and those who are considering joining the UWC SEA community. Why are we here? We're all here because we're committed to student well-being and we want our students to thrive. And we're really excited in this session to have so many different voices and perspectives, and we're looking forward to hearing your valuable insights. So this session, as Renee mentioned, will have some interactive elements. So we'll be asking you to engage with the thinking and to contribute some of your ideas. We have a Zoom chat, and we'll also have some optional breakout rooms. Now, we know that some people are joining from the auditorium or joining in a setting where you're sitting with some other colleagues. Maybe you're joining from a time zone when it's you'd prefer not to join a breakout room or even watching this recording later. So at all points, we'll always have an option for personal reflection through a stop and jot, or some conversations with people you're sitting with through a turn and talk, so that you'll always have a chance to engage with your own thinking around this topic. Throughout the session, if you have questions, you can pop them in the chat and we'll try to address them as we go, but we'll also be available, as Renee mentioned, for a networking session on the conference app following this session. So we do hope you'll stop by to continue the conversation with us. Okay, so as we get started, we wanted to take a moment for you to visualize yourself as a child. So you may want to close your eyes or lower them as you think about the things that you loved. What were some of the things that brought you joy? Some of your favorite activities, your strengths and interests? What were some things you found difficult? What were some events or challenges you experienced? Periods of sadness, perhaps. Think about your friends. Who were your friends? Your family? What close relationships you had? And think about those support systems. What did you have in place to support you through some of those more difficult times? We really want you to connect your adult self with who you were as a child. Throughout today's session and throughout all the work that we do, we really try to keep the child at the center of our work. So now that we've connected with your child's self, if you think it's not too cringe, you can just give yourself a little wave, say hi. Okay, thanks for that. Our intention today is to think about what it means to holistically consider all aspects of our students and their experiences so that we can help them be the best they can be. By thinking about ourselves as a child, we can tap into that holistic view and bring that to our conversations and reflections throughout this session.
So we keep hearing this word holistic. It's in our title, and we just like to take a moment to unpack what holistic means to you, and also what does holistic mean in the educational context. We're going to do a Zoom waterfall or a chatterfall. So we want you to write your ideas about what holistic means in the chat, or if you're working somewhere else, jot them down, but please don't hit send until we tell you to. If you're watching in the auditorium, then please turn and talk with the person next to you. So what does holistic mean to you? Please write it down now, but do not send. Okay, hopefully we've got some ideas. Hit send now. Great, so we've got some ideas coming into the chat. So a lot of them connect with emotional needs. So part of our 5 elements at UWC is looking at personal, social, and emotional health. There's comments related to parts of the whole, so looking at all of the child. Comments, Andrew mentions about diverse experiences and opportunities, which will fit in with identity. And again, one of the big things coming out is the word whole. So yes, for the purpose of this session, holistic will encompass all of those things: relationships, identity, elements, and parts of the whole. Okay, next slide, thank you. Okay, so in this session, we're going to use a tree metaphor to help us think holistically about students. Why a tree? Well, a tree is an independent organism that represents the me. However, we often see trees in a group, such as a forest or walking along a tree-lined street, which represents the we. Within the forest, we can still see the individual different species, and this is how we'd like you to think about students in our community, as different types of trees and individual trunks. In order for a tree to stand, there's also an impressive structure of support. Beneath the trunk, there is a complex root system that works together to ensure that the trunk remains healthy, it grows, and can help facilitate the growth of branches, leaves, maybe even flowers and fruit. Trees communicate with each other and support each other through networks connecting their roots to trees nearby. And trees respond to environmental conditions, growing faster or slower depending on how much light they have or if they're responding to disease or drought. When the tree is not functioning as it should, then we'll see signs. For example, in an experiment in Dubai, 2 plants were placed in a school. Students were asked to speak to one plant negatively and one plant positively. And after 30 days, it was obvious which plant had received the negative messages. It did not thrive or grow as well as the plant that had received the positive messages. So we know that trees and plants are individuals that are affected by local conditions, their community, and their environment. Just like our students who bring their experiences, their perspectives, their culture, strengths, and needs to our school. And when we notice that something isn't quite right with our students, our role is to investigate with an open mind, using a strength-based approach to dig deeper, to look at core aspects that may be impacting how the child responds to the environment and how connected their root system is. That's the holistic lens. But we also know that a healthy forest has a diversity of trees. There are different types of tree, and also some trees that are tall, some that are short, some that do well in the shade and others that thrive in the light. Again, there's a connection here to our students. Just like diversity is important for a healthy forest, we celebrate the diversity of our students, as that makes our school community healthier and richer. We seek out the assets each student brings to our community to make our community more abundant and healthy.
So in their book, Street Data, Safir and Duggan provide some compelling arguments for looking holistically, for looking beyond just assessment data in the classroom, and to consider collecting more holistic information, not just about individuals, but about our entire community. A key idea throughout that book, and that also resonated with us, is this idea that everything is connected and nothing can be separated. So related to this interconnectedness, we'd like to introduce you to a model for thinking holistically and for learning more about individuals. So the model that we'll be referring to today is called Bronfenbrenner's ecological model, and some of you may be familiar with it. Kate is using this model as the foundation for her dissertation. We've made a couple of updates to it so that it reflects some of the factors that our students in international schools face. And Kate right now is just going to walk us through the model.
Okay, thank you. So social ecological theory is a study of relationships between people and their environment. And Bronfenbrenner's initial theory proposed that an individual's development is influenced by the multi-system context in which they're positioned. His theory evolved to include the role of individuals' characteristics and place the individual at the centre, surrounded by 4 environmental layers, all underpinned by time. So we're using Bronfenbrenner's ecological model, but we'll also refer to it as a holistic model. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go through each layer, and Natasha will be using her own childhood as an illustration of what would be included in that layer. But before we start, I really just want to say thank you so much to Natasha for being open and sharing her personal experiences. So if we start at the center, we have the individual that's in the, hopefully on your screen, bright orange, and that's positioned at the center of the system. And within this, it includes the individual's characteristics such as sex, age, health, and so on, as well as their capabilities, resources, and coping behaviors.
So from the event that I'm going to be looking at, I was 8 years old, but coming back to family, I'm the eldest of 4 children who are close in age. My mum had 4 of us under the age of 5, so it was busy. I was healthy, but because we were also close in age and I was the eldest, I took a lot of responsibility in the family.
Okay, and so the microsystem, which I'm going to say is TAN, is the immediate environment in which the individual lives and interacts with, such as families, peers, setting. The individual is influenced by each of these elements and by the personal characteristics of the people within the system.
So at this point in time, I grew up in the country. We had a hill in our backyard and I had a pet sheep, which actually won 3rd place in the local pet competition. At this time, I was moved up a grade mid-year when I was 8, making me younger than my peers. My father was involved in a car accident shortly after, and as a result, we had to move to the city for him to receive treatment. At my new school, I remained in the higher grade, but I was missing some of the key grade level concepts, and joining late in the school year, it made finding friends challenging. Support from my parents was limited due to time and the events that were happening, and also having a younger sibling who was diagnosed with learning difficulties.
Okay, so the next system, the mesosystem, is blue, and that doesn't really have examples, but it recognizes the relationships between and interactions between the different aspects of the microsystem, and also relationships between the next system, the exosystem, and the microsystem. So the exosystem, which I'm saying is teal, involves elements which are external to but may influence the individual. So the outcomes of connections and processes between these elements in this layer may afford or deny opportunities for the individual, and may be temporary or have longer term impacts.
So at this time, when we moved to the city, my mum had to take on additional jobs to support the family while my father was in rehabilitation. So that meant that I had to take a lot of responsibility for my siblings, as there was no immediate family or support network in the new city. A few months after moving, my grandmother, who'd been an important person in my life, died.
Okay, and the macrosystem, which is peach in colour, the outer ring, involves the wider social and cultural environment that surround the inner systems, and that encompasses the beliefs, values, attitudes, and resources, as well as the political and legal systems. And it provides similar experiences for all in the community and directly influences the individual. So in different cases, we could have a culture of a city, we could have a culture of a country, a culture of a family, a culture of a school.
So while I moved within New Zealand and English was the medium of instruction, the dialect of Maori between the North Island and the South Island was different to that of my previous experience, and it made it feel like nothing was familiar. I didn't have a pet sheep in the city. The city was noisy, it was busy, and we couldn't run around and play as we had when we lived in the country.
Thanks. And the chronosystem in green underpins all of these layers, and it refers to the temporal and environmental experiences and transitions throughout the lifetime of an individual. So previous experiences can inform and alter an individual, the other systems and their interrelationships, and changes may come from within the individual or be externally imposed.
So at that time, I was still receiving A's on my report card. So if you looked at my assessments and the data, it would tell you that I was doing okay. So I went on, I'm the first in my family to graduate from from university. And then having experienced culture shock, not only from moving within my country, but also moving around internationally, I'm acutely aware of the complexities of that transition, and that's fueled my research interests in language and culture. It's also why I'm driven to know more and to take nothing at face value and never make assumptions about a child or their circumstances.
Thanks, Natasha. So as we can see from this, individuals are situated in and engage in many environments and are influenced by many factors and complexities. In Natasha's case, she was getting good grades, but there were a lot of underlying factors that were impacting her life.
So now we're going to shift and have a chance for you to reflect about what this holistic model might mean in the context of working with students. So think back to yourself as a child and the child that you just imagined. What information do you think would have been important or valuable for your school or class teacher to know about you? So as we can see, looking at a student in a holistic way can be complex. And just like if a tree is sick, we wouldn't all water it, or we wouldn't all provide it with fertilizer, as that would be too much for the tree and that would actually harm it. When we're thinking about students, we also need to be thinking about how we're prioritizing concerns, how we're considering the long-term impact of the student's profile, and how we're considering the best support models for those individuals. So what we're going to do now is we're going to give you a chance to chat with some others or to engage in some individual thinking about this ecological model, this holistic model. So we have two sets of prompts. One set of prompts for people who are here as an educator, and that's a very broad scope there, where we're thinking about, okay, if you're as an educator, what questions might you ask of students and or families to find out information, holistic information that would help you better understand the student? If you're here as a parent or a member of the community, think about what information you think would be valuable to share with the school. We know that we have some students in the attendance as well. So think about what information do you have about yourself that you think would be important for the school to know. And we want you to be thinking about the different levels of Bronfenbrenner's model that Kate and Natasha just walked us through. So we've set up a Padlet that we'd like to use to collect your responses. You can see a screenshot of the Padlet on the screen. And so as you're thinking, as you're chatting, please do go ahead and add your questions into the Padlet so that we can collect that thinking and those insights. And we've got the link to the Padlet in the chat. You can just go through those columns and respond. So we've got a breakout room set up. So if you'd like to join breakout rooms, you can click in to join and have the conversation there and then share your thinking on the Padlet. If you're in a setting where you'd rather not join a breakout room, then that's fine as well. Then if you're just doing a turn and talk, please feel free to make sure that you are capturing some of your thinking on the Padlet, or if you're by yourself, jot down your ideas in your notebook and or add them on the Padlet as well. We'll have some music in the main session for those who prefer to remain here and reflect, or for those who are watching in a bigger group. And we'll have about 8 minutes for this activity.
Fantastic. So there's lots of great questions that were coming out on the Padlet, and it was nice to see a lot of people were thinking at the macro level, particularly about culture and languages, which is important within an international school. So connections between cultures, looking at values, identity, affinities, and a really good point about countries that you have lived in and that you perhaps identify with, because often it's not our passport countries. From a family community level, again, the languages of the family, living arrangements, really importantly, if someone's going away in the family, letting the teacher know, student interests, passions and challenges, big events, and my husband and I often joke, we send our children to school, slept, fed, clean, and we get them at the end of the day a bit tired, worn down, and definitely not their best self, but that's the time that we often hear about some of the challenges that they're having. We hope that this Padlet will be continue to be a resource for you when you're working with students and families. So thank you for your insights and contributions. We'll go through and collate the resource into a document which will be linked to our session on the forum platform. So now that we've engaged with the holistic model, we wanted to share some tools you might use to gather more holistic information. We're going to think about these tools from various levels, so at the classroom, at a school level, and in the wider community. These tools can strengthen the roots of a system and work towards building bridges of trust within the community. Before we share some tools, think about what information you have readily accessible regarding your students. Aside from standardized and class-based test data, what other information do you regularly collect about your students? Can you please put in the chat and share some of those tools? If you're a parent or a community member, can you think about what information your child's class teacher knows about your child? So let's have a look in the chat. Some tools we've got. No tools. Is anyone wanting to share any ideas? Okay, likes and dislikes. Thanks, Mary. Perhaps maybe settling in conferences, perhaps activities where you're looking at identity and belonging. Great. Morning meeting, observations, likes and dislikes. Starting with the well-being, that's a great place to start. Excellent. Tell me about you Tuesday. That sounds exciting, Natalia. Yes, definitely talking to parents, finding about travels and living backgrounds. Okay, great, thank you. So in order for all of these tools to collect the data that's needed, we have to be ready to put aside assumptions and listen carefully with the intention to what's being said. This may not always be what we thought, and sometimes there might be layers that come with that.
Okay, so it's really good having a look at the chat because some of these are here, which is fantastic, and there's some that we don't have as well, so maybe you'll be able to think of more and add to it later. So in terms of teacher tools, we could be looking at observations, so looking at sociograms where we look at the relationships students have with each other, their engagement, the degree of attention, curiosity, interest, optimism and passion that they show when they are learning, movement and responses, who needs to move, who's taking frequent bathroom breaks, who seems like they'd rather be invisible or work really hard to hide, who always encourages their peers to share first. And then looking at student voice, I know someone has written this in the chat, identity web, so we might invite our students to engage in these, to share information about their identity through conceptual understandings about belonging and identity. Coaching conversations, here we might use an intentional frame for our conversations as part of our mentor class to get to know the students better. We might use language portraits. Parents as partners rather than parent involvement, having true respectful partnerships. So that might come with co-constructed learning plans, so focusing on the child's strength and parents' funds of knowledge to design learning plans together rather than just handing it to them. Settling in conferences were mentioned. In primary, we might use a set of shared questions in these conferences to better understand the microsystems that our students live in. And student-led conferences, I think, were there as well, so their children sharing their learning with their parents.
And then on a school-wide level, we have some additional tools that we might use, both to understand students and also to understand the community a little bit better. So we might look at focus groups, where we bring together a group of students or members of the community with a focus on listening. And we might use this when we're creating or reviewing processes or policies. We might use this as part of an equity audit to get a real sense of what are some of the concerns and issues going on in our community. Relationship mapping is a tool that I know many of you are familiar with, where we are looking at the relationships between teachers and students, and which students have authentic, positive relationships with their teachers, and which students maybe don't have those strong relationships. And we need to be really intentional about building those relationships and getting to know those students more holistically. As a school, you might engage in an equity audit, where you're looking at issues of equity across the school. Some specific ways you might do that are through classroom observations focused on equity. Maybe you're looking at patterns of who participates, who raises their hand, who is called on, who receives positive or negative feedback or responses from the teacher, and that might be verbal or nonverbal. You might do an activity where you're walking the walls, and you're really examining the work that is up on the walls around school to see whose work is represented, whose thinking is represented, whose cultures are represented. Another powerful tool is shadowing students. So you might choose some students, maybe from marginalized groups or from a variety of different groups, and shadow them for a day. Go around the entire day, sitting with them, going between classes with them, to really experience what is school like from their perspective. Another tool you might use is structured meeting observations. So thinking about a facilitator might invite an observer into a regularly scheduled meeting to observe for certain things like, how does the facilitator respond to different participants? Are there positive or negative responses? What do they notice about group dynamics, about the energy in the room, in terms of how people build off of each other's ideas, how they respectfully challenge each other, how they ask questions to probe one another's thinking? And I think Natasha mentioned our resource document. We want to reassure you that we'll be collating all of these tools, as well as the ones coming through in the chat in that document as well.
Great, thank you, Stephanie. So now we're going to look at some community tools. So based on the focus groups, but possibly broadening it to find information that would help to feed into school growth and development, might be a listening campaign. So what happens is the listener assembles and organizes a group to come together, gives them an interview, and then collates the responses anonymously together by theme. And this can be an opportunity for a school to understand if a system is working well or perhaps not, and then reflect and think about how we might move forward. Additionally, welcoming all the languages and cultures of the community. So providing information and workshops on things that happen in school in various community languages. Again, looking at building those bridges between our community and the school. Coffee mornings are a great way of bringing people together, and we're so thankful after 2 years of COVID restrictions that finally parents are welcome back on the campus, and it's so wonderful to see our community members gather. And so again, that provides a way of listening to conversations and getting a feel for what's happening within the community.
So all of these systems, or all of these tools, are really ways for us to think about how are we adding to our understanding of the whole child. And as we talk and as you think about other tools that you're familiar with, go ahead, you can continue to add them to the chat, but we can also continue the conversation in our session that comes after this. So now we want to think about, if you're thinking about using some of these tools in your own setting, how are we doing this in a way that we're not unintentionally marginalizing anyone? And also, how are we doing this in a way that's systematic and respectful? So we want you to think about, in your setting, what systems do you have in place to collect this kind of information? How are you ensuring that student voice is represented, that we're working with parents as partners, as Kate mentioned, that we're using multiple data points to increase student access to the learning? If you have strong systems for collecting that information, how do we share it? Who has access to the information that we are collecting? And how do we decide who should have that access? How is it handed over? We have this information, we have students who stay with us for many years. How do we make sure that the information is kept safe and handed over effectively to the next teacher who will be working with the students? So for example, do you have handover transition meetings? How do you share your documentation to ensure that that information is shared with the people who need to know? And throughout all of that, we need to be thinking about how we're protecting our students. So how does this emphasis on holistic support work with our desire to protect students, our responsibility to respect students, protect students, and our safeguarding practices that we have in place in the school? And ultimately, we need to be thinking about those respectful, trusting relationships that we are building with our students and with our community. How are we making sure that people can feel that they can confide in us, that they are listened to in a way that allows them to share the information that they think is valuable for them to share, and that we're ensuring confidentiality so that we're not breaking people's trust? And as you think about all those systems, then the final question, of course, is, are those systems effective and consistent?
Okay, so while we've been focused on children today, this could be applied to anyone you interact with. So based on the session today, what's one thing you'd like to try next week to use a broader holistic approach in your context?
Okay, so in summary, using a holistic lens enables us to consider the many aspects that combine to create the unique individual. Each individual requires different things to help them to thrive. An ecosystem needs diversity to be healthy and balanced, just as diversity makes our community richer. The purpose of education is not to mold students into bonsai trees. They're my favorite trees at the moment, which are carefully trimmed and cultivated to be small and neat. When we take a holistic perspective, our forest grows a range of trees, maybe giant sequoias, delicate ferns, and possibly swaying palms. A holistic lens allows our community to give our students the opportunity to grow stronger roots so that they can settle and grow as quickly and comfortably as they can into the tree they're meant to be.
So of course, what we haven't said explicitly yet is that by using a holistic lens to viewing our students as complex, unique, whole individuals, we're also being more inclusive. By welcoming the messy fullness of everyone's humanity, we create a truly inclusive environment in which all students, well, all of us really, feel included and feel like we belong. Shelley Moore is an inclusion advocate, and she reminds us that teaching to inclusion and diversity doesn't mean doing something special or something different for certain students, but rather it means valuing the very characteristics that make us diverse. So thank you so much for your engagement with this session today. We hope that we've planted some seeds for you to help you to be curious about and bring in a holistic understanding of your students. And we hope that the tools we've provided will give you specific ideas for how you might engage in this process in your setting. If you'd like to continue the conversation, please do join us in the networking session.
Thank you so much, Stephanie, Natasha, and Kate. I think you've actually given me a lot to think about. I'm not a student-facing staff member, but I think there's many ways I can apply this in different contexts in my life as well. So thank you so much. As Stephanie said, we do hope you'll join us in the virtual networking room that's dedicated to this session on the Socio app immediately after. I am just in the process of dropping that link in the chat right now, so that should take you seamlessly over there. And we hope to see you at other sessions later this afternoon. We have a couple, I think there's one more shorter session, and then our keynote at 4:45, and then a full day of sessions again tomorrow that we hope to see you at. So if you're on Dover campus, I hope that you will do some of the online or the in-person networking as well, but we will see you momentarily over on the app.